to start off a little bit about me. It's the one subject that I do know about. I have been in law enforcement since 1982. It's the first time I put on a badge and a gun. Back when I first did that, my idea was it was the ultimate game of tag. We got a cool car, we got to wear uniforms, we got to go catch bad guys. And I was a young kid and it was a lot of fun. High tech back then was carbon paper. And the world has changed. I'm looking at the people sitting here, and I'm sure everybody can remember phones where your phone rang a certain way and someone else's phone rang a certain way, and party line phones, right? My son, my kids are 25, 22, 16, and 12. The 12-year-old seemed like a good idea at the time, but at my age now, there's times I think about that. I was at my mother-in-law's house the other day, and we were in the basement, and he saw a phone that's one of these rotary dials, and he could not figure out how it worked. Had no idea. When I was in Iraq from 2009 and 10, I did war crimes investigations that insurgents committed, and my little guy at that point was 2. And I would use Skype to call home. Now, if you think back to World War II, you wrote letters, you sent cakes, you did things like that, and it might catch up in a couple months to where they are, depending on where the front was. Vietnam, same way. Korea, same way. And I was able to see my family usually twice a day, depending on connectivity and where I was in the country. I would be able to call my house, see my kids, talk to my wife, stay up to date on Christmas and birthdays. I could watch my kids open Christmas presents. And I could watch my family have Thanksgiving dinner. And to think that I'm 5,000 miles away in the middle of a desert, I mean, that just absolutely blows your mind. From the first time I came home on leave, from the time I left Baghdad to the time I landed in Wichita, Kansas, was 18 hours. When I left Baghdad, everything, and I mean everything in that world, in that country, is some shade of brown. And to get off the plane and walk out and see green, and to see blues, and to see colors within a short period of time, it was absolutely amazing. My wife, we went to Applebee's, one of my go-to restaurants when I'm in a hurry. And I remember sitting there looking at this glass full of water with ice in it, you know? And it was so strange. But the world has gotten so much smaller because of technology. And that's a blessing. That's a blessing. When my father was dying, I was able to communicate with him. I was here in Kansas, he was in Nebraska. I was able to travel up there and visit with him, but I was still able to talk to him. I was able to see him. I wasn't there physically, but it was better than a letter. I could call him every day and I could see him and have that conversation. So there's a lot of great things about technology. But this movie that we just watched, this stuff happens. It happens. It happens. I can think off the top of my head 3 cases in which I supervised, where we recovered girls in Ohio, Tennessee, and Colorado, where the parents called and said, "My daughter's gone." We had no idea where she was. One case in particular is a 15-year-old girl. She is a very good student. She comes from a very good family, upper middle class, very active in school. And one day she didn't come home from school. So the police department was called. Dad says, "Yeah, my daughter didn't come home from school. I talked to her friends. Nobody knows where she's at. So the officer made a runaway report, which is pretty standard. I don't know if anybody's done that here in Salina. They make a runaway report. Wichita, we get about 2,000 of them a year. We have one officer that works them.
Wow.
Okay? So he makes a runaway report. The next day I'm sitting in my office, and I know nothing about the runaway report. I get a call from the sheriff's office down in Joplin, Missouri, and they say, hey, we found this cell phone. The cell phone's been wiped, but we're able to figure out that the phone number belongs to this girl in Wichita. And when we ran the girl, we found out that she's a runaway. Well, it's the girl that walked out of the high school in Wichita as a runaway. We now have her device on a highway leading into the Ozarks in Missouri. So what's that tell us? Right off the bat. She's out of the state, right? How many 15-year-old girls are going to lose their phone in the highway? All the pictures and all the contacts had been deleted from the phone. It was collected moisture overnight. So we know that this girl is gone. So we get the phone. We talk to her parents. Does she have any social media accounts? Well, she has Facebook. What's her Facebook account? We get all her social media accounts. Those are the ones the parents knew about. Parents, do you know the password for your daughter's social media accounts? No. We believe in giving her privacy. Now, I understand privacy. In my house growing up, we didn't have privacy. We had 8 kids. There was no such thing as privacy. You did have your own bedroom. There was one phone, had a 15-foot cord, and it was in the kitchen. Everybody used it. There was no privacy. My kids don't get privacy. Everywhere in my house is accessible to me. If you are online, all your accounts are accessible to me, and you don't want me to take your phone and take it to work and download the contents. Kind of like Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. It's a pretty good rule. So the parents didn't know her accounts. We were able to use her phone number, and we were able to generate, using the account that they gave us, send a subpoena to Facebook. And when we sent the subpoena to Facebook, we found out that she had 4 other Facebook accounts that the parents had no knowledge of. Looking at those accounts, we found out that she also had Snapchat, she had Instagram, she had 4 or 5 separate Facebook or social media accounts. We had to send subpoenas to all those companies for her account information along with preservation letters, so none of the information is deleted or goes away. You guys remember in the movie when he was standing in front of the high school and it said something, high school, home of the catfish? You guys know what catfishing is? That was intentional by the director of this. Catfishing is when I take on someone else's persona with the intent of defrauding you or tricking you or making you believe that I'm somebody else. That's what happened to this young lady. This person presented as one individual, which was bogus. We were able to figure out who she had been communicating with. We were able to figure out from video surveillance of the school that he was driving a blue pickup truck. We were able to figure out that they got on 235 or 35 and were headed to Emporia. And at some point in time, they went south. Long story short, after about 18 hours, we were able to recover this girl in a wooded area in Marshall County, Tennessee, where she was in the process of being sexually assaulted by her abductor. She was recovered. She is doing fine. The offender, I really don't care how he's doing, but it shows how important a parent's role is when we give our children access to the internet. If you think about it, how many people have seen 10-year-olds walking around with iPhone 10s? That's a $1,000 phone, something like that? And you're going to give a 10-year-old that? Are you out of your flipping mind? If you think about it, that device that you were putting in that child's hand has more power than the first rocket that went to the moon. And you turn a 10-year-old loose with it. And what I can tell you is with that device, anybody in this world can make contact with your child from any place. If, let's say Susan is sitting here, and Susan's online, and Susan's having problems at home. Her grades are failing. She's not getting along with her parents. She doesn't feel like she has any friends at school. But I'm going through the Salina High School profiles, Facebook page profile, and I see this picture of Susan, and I look at her profile because it's public. And I see that she doesn't have a bunch of friends, and a lot of her posts are very negative. And then I create a profile where I become Mary. And Mary is Susan's age, and Mary has a lot of the same interests that Susan has because those interests are posted on her Facebook page. And I send her a friend request. And then we start communicating because I'm Mary, and what I'm doing is I'm finding out everything I need to know about Susan. What she likes, what she doesn't like, the problems at home, all the difficulties she's going through in her life. And then I say, you know, I have a best friend in the world. He's a great guy. His name's Dave. I'm going to have him send you a friend request. Well, guess what? I'm Dave too. So now I get on my Dave account and I send her a friend request. My friend Mary said that you're a cool girl. So she accepts the friend request. And all of a sudden, she's talking to this guy who is the smartest guy in the world. He really gets me. He just knows how to answer all my questions. He just knows how, I feel about things. He understands me. He's the love of my life. And yeah, I realize he's a little older than I am. He's 25. But you know what? We're going to run off to Europe, and we're going to live on a mountaintop in a castle, and we're going to watch unicorns slide down rainbows. Because I love him. And pretty soon, one night, she walks out of the house, and she gets in a car with Dave, who's actually not Dave. He's somebody else altogether. And she's gone. Now, I would like to come here and tell you a bunch of happy thoughts. But what I can tell you is that the internet and social media, yes, they're fabulous. They're blessings. But there's a lot of evil out there. A lot of evil. And if we're not monitoring what our children or what our grandchildren are doing online, somebody else is going to be. Go back to the iPhone 10. Now, when we all got our driver's licenses, some of us went through driver's safety. Some of us went through the right seat, left seat, had to drive parents around in the car for a while before they trusted you. Before we finally got, we got our learner's permit, and then we got our regular driver's license. Well, some of us, 12 years old driving tractors on the farm, but it wasn't the new tractor, it was the old one, right? Well, we got our driver's license, and we were able to drive without anybody else in the car. Did we drive the new car?
Definitely not.
No. We drove the one that might work if you work on it on the weekend. It might last long enough to go to a movie on Saturday night, right? And then it will break down Sunday morning, and you'll have to work on it a week again for Saturday night. But we're giving a 10-year-old a system that can communicate anywhere in the world in multiple languages on every platform, and we're turning them loose unsupervised. And I guarantee you the possibility of them being injured online, either psychologically or maybe physically, and certainly sexually exploited, is a lot greater than the possibility of getting in a traffic accident. yet we don't put them through any of that. We don't have those conversations with kids. We don't talk to kids about the dangers that are out there or what they should do if they ever come across them. We assume that our kids are going to do the right thing, but do we really know? Has anybody's kids ever lied to them? Anybody's kids ever got caught? Anybody ever got caught by their parents? Yeah, it's a rite of passage, right? And it's kind of funny because everybody thinks they always came up with the first time anybody's ever come up with a great idea. I'm going to go spend a night at my friend's house, but I'm actually not there. I'm someplace else. My parents will never come up and figure that out because nobody ever did that before. The same thing is true when your kids are online. What social media apps are they using? There's 2.5 million applications out there. 2.5 million. They do everything. You can find an app to do almost everything. Social media apps, what do they do? Can I text? Can I send files? Can I send pictures? Can I send movies? How old do I have to be to get in there? There's rules sometimes. Your kids will know. How many of you have taken their phone to see what applications are on their phone? Good. We need to. If we're not familiar with the application that's on the phone, download it ourselves. See what it is. Play with it. Research it. That's what we have to do when we're investigating these cases. But it's a scary world out there. And what you saw here, that stuff happens. Now, I got to tell you, I wouldn't have Dad all up in that investigation. Although I understand Dad punching out the kid at the movie theater. I get that. But we take over those investigations. And we take over those accounts. And we do that to preserve evidence, to make sure that it's not altered, and to follow those leads. So we will take over the accounts. Now, my investigators in Wichita, I have 4 detectives and 2 federal agents that are assigned to me permanently, and we respond statewide. So if something like this were to happen in Salina, Salina calls us and says, hey, we have this. I loaded my people and we come up here. All our equipment, all my investigators, all our computers, my 4 forensic investigators, and we go to work. And we don't go home until we find a job. That's what we're supposed to do. I would never have a conversation with a parent over the phone like this detective did. Of course, the detective's a killer, so I mean, you know, we have to have contact with the parents. We have to keep them informed of what's going on. But the bottom line is they don't need to know every single aspect of the investigation because, quite frankly, you don't want to know, generally speaking. Now, what kind of a problem is it? If you think about homicides, those are serious crimes. Everybody takes a homicide extremely serious. Why? Because somebody's life is over, correct? And that family deserves justice for what's happened to them. And when a homicide happens in Salina, what resources does the Salina Police Department throw at it? Everybody, right? Patrol, investigations, Sheriff's Department, everybody comes, KBI comes in, everybody works, and you throw all those resources at it, which is good. How about if a child's being sexually exploited online? How many resources are being thrown at it? Maybe a detective. My point is that in Kansas, a Jessica's Law violation holds the same penalty first offense as a murder does. Except with Jessica's Law, my main concern is to identify who that victim is, to make sure that they get services, and to make sure that they recover from what's happened. Secondary is putting a bad guy in jail. That's the icing on the cake. But my primary is to take care of that child, whoever that child is. And our victims, you know, are not, generally speaking, are not sometimes very cooperative because they're in love with their offenders, or they think that they're in love with their offenders. I mean, how mature is a 13-year-old child? But they think that this is the love of their life. So sometimes a lot of therapy has to go into it. But these kids can recover. But I'd rather prevent it altogether. Now, if you think about the size of a full-length Hollywood movie, that is about 2.5 gigabytes, sometimes 3 gigabytes. Titanic, I think, was 3 gigabytes of data. Is anybody familiar with computers?
No.
Okay. A gigabyte is a pretty good chunk of storage space. Okay? And my 4 forensic investigators processed over 93,000 gigabytes of child pornography for the state of Kansas last year.
Wow.
And we're talking 15-second videos, JPEGs, 2-minute videos, 3-minute videos, 93,000 gigabytes of data.
That's sad.
That is an astronaut. That is more data than is contained in the Library of Congress.
Does the crew get therapy?
What's that?
Does the team get therapy?
Actually, I have a clinical psychotherapist that comes into my office once a week and works with my investigators. That's an excellent question. That's something I'm very cognizant of. If you walk into a lot of workspaces, you'll hear streaming music videos, you'll hear whatever. You walk into my office, it's very, very quiet. And the reason is they have to go through these images. And you cannot listen to a child being raped and not take that home with you. There's no pictures of families or on my investigators' desks because you can't do this and see your family. 4 o'clock, everything in my office stops. I bought them an electric dartboard. They go get coffee, whatever. Decompress for an hour before you go home from work. I don't want you taking it home. But on Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving or anniversaries or birthdays, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if I call my people, they're available to me, and they know when they leave that they're not going to come home until we have a resolution if a child is in danger. And that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of mobility. And I have to look out for them. One forensic investigator, they're the people, if you think about, anybody seen CSI? Okay. My forensic investigators are the digital CSI people. They're the ones that actually get into the computers, get down to the ones and zeros, locate our evidence, and bring it out in a manner that we can use in court. For me to train and equip one investigator, it costs me $100,000, give or take. So I want to keep them around, and I can't do that if I burn them out. Technology is constantly changing. You think about Apple phones a couple of years ago. The Apple phones, there was a big deal with the FBI. They were trying to get into an Apple phone because of terrorists were shooting at a nightclub, and Apple wasn't cooperating. You guys remember Mad Magazine?
Yes.
Spy versus Spy?
Yes.
Right? That's what the technology world is like. And I'm not kidding at all. So there's a company in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a little upstart company, but they figure out how to defeat Apple. So they sell a box that's about this big, about 4 by 4, and the license for that is $15,000 a year for that little box that costs them. Well, if you buy the license, they give you the box. Pretty big-hearted of them, right? It's probably got about $45 worth of hardware and equipment in it. But it can break into an iPhone. So Apple found out that this company was able to defeat the iPhone, so they changed the iPhone. So this company figured out what they did and updated their software. And now it's actually a spy versus spy thing. And it's actually kind of fun to watch. But the amount of money that's involved in this, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we have to have it to keep our kids safe. Now, if you think you have a child and your child is online or has a phone Do you have rules in your house for the phone? Do they use it at the dinner table? Do we have dinner with our kids anymore? Where do they use the phone? If they're using it in their bedroom, in the bathroom, why? Do they need it there? Do they take it in their room with them overnight? If so, why? Do they need it there? Who's texting them at 2:30 in the morning that they need to respond to? Or should parents take that phone and keep it with them until they need it in the morning? What kind of phone should your child have? Why do children have phones?
Their parents.
What's that?
To call their parents.
To call their parents.
Parents can call them.
How many kids
Locate.
have phones to call their parents? How many kids use the phones to call their parents? Yeah. So why does it have a camera? When you're 10 years old, do you need a phone with a camera? Do you need a phone that has Wi-Fi? Or do you need a phone that makes phone calls? They still sell those at Walmart.
Track phone.
Track phone, absolutely. Absolutely. Until they get to the point where you trust them to get an increase. Why start them out in a Lamborghini? Just like the car. You're not getting the new car. You're going to learn on the old truck. Something to think about for parents. That's a parental decision each one of us has to make. My oldest son was 15 when I got him a phone, and I told him, under no uncertain terms, the purpose for this phone is when I call you, you answer the phone. I don't want a text message. I want to hear your voice. You guys know the 3-call rule for parents, right? First call is I'm someplace I'm not supposed to be. I got to find a quiet place. Second call is I'm on my way to the quiet place. The third call is I've gotten to the quiet place and now I can answer the phone and talk to mom and dad. That's usually how it worked in my family. So my son told me he understood and he did pretty good with it until we went to Iraq. So I'm in Iraq and I come back and I'm back for a couple weeks and I called my son and he didn't answer. I called my son and he didn't answer. I called my son and he didn't answer. And I sent a text message, which I really do not like to do. And then he finally called me back after about a half hour and I said, hey, I need you for this. But the bottom line is that when I call you, I expect you to answer the phone right away. I want to hear your voice. I know you have the phone with you. I know you keep it charged. I don't want to hear any excuses. If you can't do that, you're going to lose your phone. Do you understand? He said, yes. So we went another couple weeks. I called him, and I called him, and I called him. I texted him, and I called him, and I texted him. About an hour and a half later, he calls me back. I said, hey, no worries. I got it taken care of. When you get home, just get with me, okay? Yep, sure thing, Dad. All right, thanks. So he comes home. I said, hey, let me see your phone. He hands me the phone. I said, come on, let's go out in the garage. Ball, peen, hammer, smash the phone. Now I said, I don't have to worry about you answering my phone. Never did. When you get old enough to get your own contract, you get a phone and you do what you want. But I'm not paying for it. All 3 of my other kids answer the phone. He bought a phone when he got old enough, and he answers the phone. But the other 3 seeing what happened, sent a message. I'm not going to put up with it. In the movie, there's a lot of trauma that's involved in Dad's life and the girl's life. The loss of her mother. There's kind of an alienation, that time period. I could not imagine being a father losing my wife with a child in that age group. That would be incredibly difficult. But one thing that jumped out at me is they appeared to have, like they were friends. You know? He was, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm good. We're going to watch The Voice, this and that. Not speaking as a cop, but as a parent, I'm not friends with my kids. I'm not. I love them to death. I want the best for them. But my job's not to be their friend. My job's to be their dad. And sometimes kids get mad at their father. I know I did. I was amazed how smart my dad was after I turned about 26. But that's what we do. We have to be able to know what is going on with our children's lives. So if something like this does happen, we have the answers. Yes, this is what they do. This is who they talk to. This is who their social media is. This is their account. How many accounts do your kids have? How many Facebook accounts? How many ChatStep accounts? How many Snapchat accounts? Are they on you now? What are they doing online? And I think as parents we have a moral obligation to find out. Because I could not imagine calling the police and saying, I don't know where my child is. I can tell you that when I became a police officer, the city of Wichita was my jurisdiction. I dealt with cases inside the city of Wichita. The Salina Police Department deals with cases inside the Salina Police Department, or the city of Salina. And with these types of crimes, there are no jurisdictions anymore. We deal with cases where our victims are literally all over the world, and they're being offended by people here in Kansas. We deal with cases where the children in Kansas are being taken advantage of by people from all over the world. I worked a case a couple years ago where I got an image from New Zealand of a young lady that was being hosted on a Russian website that we found out and were able to identify as a young lady that lived in southern Sedgwick County. So I'm getting my case from New Zealand about this girl from Sedgwick County because it's hosted on a Russian website. How fast do those images go around the world? And when parents call me and say, hey, my kid made a mistake, they did something wrong, you know, they were being influenced by this and this and this, and those images are out there. Can you take them down? And my answer is no. We can't. Forevermore, they will be out there. So we have to be able to engage at younger ages and have those talks. Yes, ma'am.
I know you talked about proactive, like being involved, but there's also parental controls that you can, like, my kids are grown now, but they didn't have cell phones back then when they were younger. But there's ways where you can shut the router off at the,
Absolutely.
you know, they can't get to the internet in the middle of the night, and you know, and there's software on your cell phone that you can keep them from the cell phone companies and get it so that they can't call out only to certain numbers, and you know, that kind of stuff.
There are some things there's a lot of programs out there. You can work with your provider and restrict access during certain times for certain phone numbers. So it has no Wi-Fi service, it has no phone number. That's provided with some providers. But the problem is, who's smarter with technology, kids or parents? I guarantee you put that software on that child's phone, before they walk out of the house, it's deactivated. That's why we have, yes, sir?
I'm curious about other parts of the world in terms of the manner in which they treat data, especially images of children. So my impression is that the European Union pretty much said, gee, you want to take a picture of a kid, talk to their parent. And it feels like it's very different here than that. There's very little image of children, very little law preventing the use, abuse, or whatever, or dissemination without permission. So I'm curious about your take, because I hope you know more about it than I do.
No, and each country has different laws associated with it. Great Britain, they're very proactive in doing a lot of cases over there. Ireland, Scotland, France, Germany, they're very, very good. You get into some of the former Eastern European bloc nations, not so much.
No enforcement.
You get into Southeast Asia, not so much. You get into Singapore, very proactive. You don't want to get caught in Singapore. It kind of depends on the country. Latin America, there's a lot of human trafficking that goes on coming up through Latin America and into the United States. It's just, it depends on the laws of the country. When I became the commander of the task force in 2014, we get a lot of our cases from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They come in as cyber tips. And 2014, I took over command, and that year there were 750,000 cyber tips that went out. That's worldwide, okay? Kansas, on average, back then we were getting 200 to 300 a year. Last year we had 12.5 million cyber tips. And Kansas, I think we had 1,400 assigned here for my investigators. I mean, technology has made the ability, if you think back when we were in school, there was the stranger danger, right? Don't talk to strangers in parks. Everybody knows to stay away from the guy in the trench coat. There was a stereotypical thing that was kind of taught, right? And we were very protective of our kids. When we went to the store, I mean, I'm still that way. I go to Walmart with my kids. I have to have eyes on them. That's just the life I've led. And my 25-year-old really isn't really keen on that idea. But that's just me. But if a bad guy wanted to go exploit a child, what he had to do was he had to actually leave to find a target. Okay? Then he had to groom that target. He had to interject himself into that child's life in some way. And to do that, he usually had to go through the parents, unless it was going to be a stranger abduction, right? And that doesn't happen anymore. Now the bad guys come into your house right through your Wi-Fi, and they're talking to your kids. We've done search warrants where we've gone into a house where bad guy sits here on a chair that will never be used again by a human. He's got computer monitors, 5, 6 computer monitors up. He's got a litter box next to his chair, a stack of pizza boxes, and 2-liter Mountain Dew bottles all over the place. And the reason is he's peeing in a litter box because he's talking online to kids, and all he needs is one to agree to meet him. And the guy that I'm thinking of specifically, he had over 60 kids he was carrying on a conversation with simultaneously. Wow. He's putting a lot of time and effort into getting a hold of your kids. A young man we took down in Beloit not too long ago was running 3 servers out of his basement. He couldn't afford a chair in his front room, but he's running 3 servers. So if we're not paying attention to what our kids are doing, somebody else is going to be. The easiest thing in the world to do is to be anonymous online until it becomes necessary. My daughter, bless her heart, she's a nurse here now, works at Salina Regional. Fantastic lady. Very, very proud of her. But when she wanted to get a Facebook account, she was in 9th grade. And we talked about it one morning on the way to school. And I said, hon, I understand everybody has a Facebook account. I get it. And I'm okay with it. But here's one rule. I always have the one rule, kind of like Columbo. Yeah, one more question. You know? The rule is you do not friend anybody that you have not physically met in person, face to face. You understand? Yes, sir, I understand it. You know what? We'll give it a try. So she got her Facebook account. 2 weeks later, I created an account. I sent her a friend request. Guess what she did? She accepted it. Within 2 weeks, we're best friends. She's telling me about where all the parties are on the weekend, what all her friends are doing. Yeah. So we're driving to school some morning, and I said, hey, tell me about so-and-so. I saw her on your Facebook account. Oh, yeah, she's a great girl. She goes to this high school. She's a lot of fun. I said, really, that's me. Somebody's grabbed it. So that's exactly my point. You do not know who it is that you are accepting this friend request from. Why are our kids' information wide open on Facebook? Why aren't they made private? Whatever accounts, what information are our kids putting out there? Are they putting out their date of birth, their social security number? Are they sharing their passwords with their friends? How many times has a kid said, yeah, my account's been hacked? How many times have you shared your password? We need to protect our information. We need to protect our most valuable resource, which is our children. When I was 16, I had the answer to every question the world ever came up with, and I forgot them all. We think we know. And these people are spending way more time and way more resources trying to figure out a way to exploit your children. And they'll do it. I know I'm not a ray of hope and a little rainbow with sunshine, but I don't think I would be serving you by coming up here and telling you that the internet's a great place, it's safe, and, you know, nothing bad's gonna happen there. It's a great place. It can be safe, but very bad things can happen there. Very bad things.
Questions?
You know, when I was a detective, I was lead investigator in over 2,500 cases. And I've worked all kinds of cases. I've worked everything from urinating in public to first-degree murder to bombings, arson. And it's funny, with most of those cases, I can't remember the victim's face. I charged a lot of people when I was working sex crimes and physical abuse. And during the course of my career, there were 6 acquittals in trials, which I think is pretty good. But I can remember the face of each and every one of those children, because I always think I could do something more. I could have made that case stronger, because there's no doubt in my mind what happened to those kids. And back then, the average age of our victim was between, I would say, 8 and 12. And now with the cases that we're working, we're talking infant, toddler, prepubescent, bondage, sadomasochistic rape. And I'm talking, you know, a month old, being exploited. So we need to protect our kids. When I talk about pornography and what these devices are doing, I'm not talking about Susie sending Johnny a picture, or Johnny sending Susie a picture because they're boyfriend and girlfriend. That needs to stop. We need to make sure our kids aren't doing that. But what I'm talking about is some very serious, very ugly, very dark stuff. And I will do everything in my power to send each and every one of those people to prison forevermore. Let me tell you a story, speaking of technology. One of my detectives a couple months ago, we were investigating an individual in Junction City, and we had some images that were new to us that we hadn't seen before, which is kind of sad to say, but if we see new images, we try to identify the children. That's what we should do. And she noticed that on one of the children there was a school crest, like a school shirt. She spent about a week and a half of her own time off duty online trying to research that crest, and she was able to identify that school up in Canada. She got a hold of the police up in Canada. They were able to identify those children and rescue those 3 children up in Canada. And we were able to get the offender that actually committed the offense that the subject in Junction City had the images of. That's what we're about. Because each and every one of those pictures is a picture of a crime in progress. and I want the person who did it. In order for me to do a good job, I have to depend on parents and grandparents and everybody else to help us by talking to your kids, knowing what they're doing. Kids don't need 24/7 access to the internet. They don't need to be online 5 hours a day. They don't need to be in their bedroom. Nothing good happens online in their bedroom. Almost every self-production case of a teen we see happens in the bathroom or the bedroom. There's a reason for that, because it's their privacy, right? No, if you're online, you don't need to have a private area. That's my rules. I can go on and on and on, and I'm not a very happy person. Actually, I'm a very nice person. The topic is just not very happy, and I apologize for that. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned something about like images of kids undergoing unfortunate, horrible crimes, but do Facebook and Instagram post those images, or are they blocked from doing that now? And
The cyber tips that, there's a federal law that passed, that any image of child pornography that Facebook or Snapchat or
Whatever.
YouTube or whatever, they have to report that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where it came from, the IP addresses, and that's where our cases are generated from. Unfortunately, there's a lot of it out there. But yes, if it's there, they will report it, and they will take down that image,
Okay,
that image.
right.
But that doesn't mean if it's
That
on
copy of
Facebook.
that image.
What's that?
That copy of that image.
No, I can't get that. If it's hosted on a Russian server
Right.
or on an offline account, they can't touch it. So that image can come up the next day,
Sure.
back again. We did a target gentleman out in Liberal. We had 800 cases on him. 800, because of what he was doing online. He was very prolific. We have, does anybody know what a web crawler is? It's one of these cool things. And basically, we have a program that is backloaded with 2.5 million images of known child pornography. And not images themselves, but it's kind of like a DNA profile of each image. So when we see that, we know that it's this image that's been identified as a known image of child pornography. And what it does, it goes out on the net, and it goes all across Kansas, and it says, oh, this person is downloading this image. And then it goes into that person's computer, we get a copy of their child pornography, then we draw a warrant, and then we go to their house and visit them. It's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, because we've actually already got the evidence before we even go to the house. But those are the cases, they're proactive cases, and we're getting into a lot of smaller communities where there's children in those homes. Those cases would have never been reported. I think one case we did out in western Kansas where the gentleman had been in prison in Michigan for sexual exploitation of a child. He got paroled to the love of his life that he met while he was incarcerated out in western Kansas. Thank you, state of Michigan. She had 3 children of her own, and she lived next door to a daycare. So he essentially went from Michigan State Penitentiary to Disneyland. He's exploiting the 3 children in his home, and he's talking to his former cellmate, who's at home with their kids and his wife, and he's directing them on to exploit those children up in Michigan. We ended up taking care of him with Jessica's Law here. He's done for the rest of his life. And then we did a 26-count indictment up in Michigan on that gentleman. And that was a proactive case in a very small town where that would have never happened had we not run those types of programs. So we try to catch them all, kind of like Pokemon. But there's a lot of them out there. Any other questions? I could ramble on a long time.
Well, I think I'm I use technology. I have 3 teenagers in my house. We all use technology and social media. So I think that I'm aware as a parent. How much would you say I'm probably not aware, and what are the things I should watch for?
I would, Have you ever checked your kid's phone?
Sure.
Okay. Have you ever
Do I know
researched?
what I'm looking for?
Right. Have you ever researched all their apps to find out what they are?
Yes, we have the app where they have to ask me before they can purchase an app.
Perfect.
So,
Do you know how many accounts that they have?
that part, I'm gonna say no. I mean, how would I know?
You're gonna have to find out. That's, you know, we find out because we send a subpoena to Facebook. And each account, I have my phone number, and that's what the account is based on. So I can change the name, I can create different accounts, but it comes back to the same phone number. So we'll get subpoenas out for that phone number, and we'll find 4 accounts.
How would she find that out, though?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Like, are there tools that you know of? that-
I'm sure that there's somebody out there that has some. I would look at the rules of whatever program it is, go into their agreement. How old do they have to be to utilize that application? What are the rules for multiple accounts? Because each one is different. So I can't really say.
What are the apps to be watching for that maybe kids are misusing, that look innocent on the surface?
There's a calculator app. If you look on your child's phone and you see 2 calculators, one of them is a calculator, and the second is a hidden file system, where they have to enter a passcode in order to get into it. It's a 0 numbers. Matter of fact, we just had a kid last week that was using it. That's probably the sneakiest, because it looks just like a calculator app, and it works as a calculator as well. But if they have 2 calculators on their phone, research that a little bit. There's a lot of good information available from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at NetSmarts. If you go to that website, they have information on cell phone, on internet, on keeping your kids safe. They have different education programs for elementary school, middle school, high school, teachers, professionals, and there's a lot of good resources there. And each app is completely different, and you'd have to look at it.
This is sort of related, I guess, but nowadays, people in prison, what kind of internet access do they have? Because I hear stories, I've heard stories that there's quite a range.
Honestly, I do not know. We do some work sometimes with the Department of Corrections, but I can tell you that we work child pornography or sex exploitation cases on people that are locked up in Larned. Okay, so how are they getting child pornography in the sex offender wing at Larned? Yet it's there. It's smuggled in on hard drives. It's I don't know what their Wi-Fi access is. I don't know what the restrictions are. I know some of them they can't be on Wi-Fi. They can't be online. Yet they're out there. They're still doing it. So I don't know what the answer is. I know that phones are smuggled in all the time. I don't know what the answer is. I'm sorry.
What did you say the program was? NetSmart?
NetSmarts. It's NETSMARTZ.
Z, okay.
.com, net, org,
Right.
whatever.
But if you get the smarts with a Z, it'll take you right to it. Yes, ma'am.
What would you say is kind of the profile of somebody who's doing rotten stuff like this? Is there any specific kind of MO or?
Well, how do I say this? Construction worker, teacher, police officer, politician, judge, lawyer, doctor, dentist, just about everybody. I don't think that there is a profile. I think, and this is my personal opinion, the most dangerous animal in the world to a child is mom's new boyfriend.
Yeah.
I couldn't give you a profile. I can't even say the profile is man or woman anymore. because we're running into more and more female offenders because of the proliferation of the pornography on the internet. You know, it's, the vast majority of them are men. We're running into more and more women.
How many child abductions has there been in the last year? Like for sex trafficking teens and,
Child abductions for sex trafficking?
yeah.
I wouldn't be able to put a number on that because I wouldn't call them actual abductions. Generally speaking, when a child gets brought into sex trafficking type situation, that child's already been contacted at the mall or at school by somebody. They know who it is. They leave home because this person's going to care for them. They're going to treat them well. They're going to take them to hotels. You know, we're going to go on a trip to Dallas and I'm going to take you to McDonald's. Red Lobster is always a big treat. I don't know what it is about Red Lobster, but I don't know how many traffickers would promise these girls take them to Red Lobster.
So they're not like picking them up at
No.
Walmart and.
Grabbing
or-
them, putting them in a car and going? No, that's not happening. If it did, it is very, 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 very rare, and I've never been a part of one of those investigations. I think last year in Wichita, we recovered 62 girls. And all of those are with people that they know. Because so-and-so loves me, he's gonna take care of me. You know, he gives me weed, he gives me meth, we gotta go travel, you know, he takes me down to Oklahoma City, and then we go over to Dallas, and then we go down to New Orleans, and then we head over to Florida, and then we come up through Atlanta, and we make this big circle. And you can actually follow, there's a tool that we use, it's called Spotlight, and it was actually developed by Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore. They're the ones that provided the financing for it. And say, I'm gonna be an escort. My wife would laugh about that, but let's say it's fine. I'm gonna be an escort, and someone posts my image here in Salina, Kansas. Okay? And then I leave Salina and I go to Wichita. And then I leave Wichita and I go to Oklahoma, and I kind of follow the circuit that I just discussed. I can actually put information in this system, pull it up, and I can get all those ads from all those locations. So I know, for example, I was up here a couple of years ago talking to somebody, and the night that I was talking to them, I know that there were 65 people in Salina escorting themselves the night when I was here talking to them. Because they're posting. I'm available, truck stop, you know, up here on I-70, and the different hotels, and I mean, it's here, it's everywhere. But they'll be here for a couple of days, and then they'll go down to Wichita, and then they'll go to Oklahoma, or they'll go back and forth on I-70 between Kansas City, Junction City, Topeka, you know, down to Salina. Sir?
What's the end result of the unresolved cases?
You know, sometimes, I'll give you a personal story. In 1996, I worked a case on a young lady, and it was one of those cases where I knew what happened to her, but I could not prove it. And I went on to do other cases. And in 2004, I was out in Colby, and I was talking to a group about forensic interviewing process, how we interview kids involved in physical and sexual abuse to get information. And after this class, the social worker walks up to me and she says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "No, I'm sorry, what's your name?" She told me her name. She said, "You worked my case." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't remember it." But she was married, and she was in a good career. She was doing what she felt she needed to do. And I was very pleased to see that. But I went back and I pulled that case from 1996 and I read it. And in 1996, I felt that I did a really good job on that case. In 2004, when I went back and looked at it, I wasn't so comfortable with it. We don't win them all, not even close. But I'm very proud to say that the ones that we do win, we get a lot of service for those kids. We get them into therapy. In Wichita, we offer it for free at the Child Advocacy Center. They have good advocacy there. And we prosecute those people when we put them in jail. That's one case. Other cases, I know that children have ended up dead. And that's something that we have to live with. So there's a full spectrum of unresolved. Anybody else? Nobody else?
Good night, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. And, thanks for having me to Salina.